decision for you. So check out budgeteers.com or go to youtube.com/budgeteers and help make your trip the best it can be. Budgeteers.com is not a travel agency, and it is not affiliated with the Disney Corporation or any of its holdings. In a world gone mad, one progressive will do a bad movie trailer guy impression to get you to listen to his show. There's only one thing that I like better than the Liberal Dan Radio Minicast. Alright, Bill, that's enough of that. On the Liberal Dan Radio Minicast, you will hear an honest discussion of the day's issues, with some personal bits in between. You might even hear what the other side has to say, sometimes even in their own voices. So become one of the Liberal Dan family, because family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. To hear those bad impressions and more, tune into the Liberal Dan Radio Minicast. Talk from the left, that's right. And I think to myself, what a wonderful show. Yeah. If you enjoy Liberal Dan Radio, there's many ways that you can support the show. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can like me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter or TikTok. And you can become a Liberal Dan Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you can get a shout out. Higher levels get the opportunity to vote on what I do next on the podcast, the Minicast, or on YouTube. You can even buy commercial advertising or sponsor bits. So go to patreon.liberaldan.com and support the show today.
Hey there, podcast listeners. This is Deminox, host of The World According to Knox. It's time for Season 2, where I take you on another trip through my world. The world of movies, video games, pop culture, and more. Relate them to the world around you. Don't forget to leave a question for Marscat, and find me on Twitter by the handle XDeminox. That's the letter X like X-Men, D-E-M-I-N-O-X. Now enjoy the rest of your podcast.
And welcome back to Liberal Dan Radio, Talk from the Left, that's right. This is your host, Dan Zimmerman, coming at you from New Orleans, Louisiana. To join the conversation, it's 914-803-4131. That's 914-803-4131. We fixed our YouTube issues, I believe. It is back up. The stream is back up and running on youtube.com/LiberalDanRadio if you wanted to pay attention over there. Do want to go back to the Blog Talk Radio chat for a second and just answer some of the questions. Daily News bringing a boy for New York. They will be in lockdown mode beginning December 26th over Omnivariant. Does that mean Omnivariant agreed to not enter New York until December 26th? No, but typically a lot of times with these lockdowns that start, they can't just lock down immediately. They have to have give some warning. I don't know if that's legislatively required as to how much warning they have to give before a lockdown, or if it's just a reasonableness factor of, hey, it's coming, but we can't implement it now, or we're not going to demand that you implement it tomorrow. We're giving you a couple days to implement the lockdown policies. So that's why. So Dan, your example of people who took actual horse dewormer are anecdotal. So why do you keep using that example? Well, because it happened and because I mock them. That's why I keep bringing that up. It's not because I want to mock the people who are having a doctor prescribe them ivermectin. I think if a doctor wants to prescribe you ivermectin and you want to listen to your doctor's advice, that doctor should be able to prescribe you ivermectin. I also believe that if you're at a hospital and the hospital's like, look, we have to limit our liability here, and we are not seeking to. We don't want to prescribe things that are not recommended for COVID-19 as treatment. So therefore, since ivermectin is not considered a approved drug to treat COVID-19, that we are not going to allow it to happen in our hospital. I think that's fine too. But if your doctor wants to prescribe it to you and you want to take it, I don't think you should necessarily have to get in the way. Now, people will oftentimes cite Donald Trump's right to try legislation that he had passed. Something I agree with, by the way. It's one of the things I agree with that Donald Trump did was passing the right to try. Right to try doesn't cover this here because right to try has to you have to have at least had something, you have to be able to participate in some sort of FDA approved trial. So ivermectin, I don't think wouldn't be covered under the law that Donald Trump helped get passed to allow people and give them the right to try potential therapeutic thing. And I think you also have to be like in a situation where you're close to end of life. It can't just be like, hey, I just got sick with COVID, therefore I want to use Right to Try. I think you have to have like some sort of like, advanced cancer or some other similar type of form. See, Daily News. Therefore, if COVID-19 was really that deadly, they wouldn't have and still are sending people home, and only when symptoms get worse go to the hospital. That's dumb. I don't understand what that means right there. But I do want to go through some of the comments in chat and not ignore one of my faithful listeners weekly to Liberal Dan Radio. Real quick, speaking of like science and like the people, first of all, also I gave a shout out to Demonox. I want to give a shout out also to Cesar, my good friend out in California, and to your boy Chris, all of whom are Liberal Dan Radio patrons. Go to patreon.liberaldan.com or patreon.com/liberaldan and you can support the show. Little as $3 a month. You could buy advertising if you have a business. You can sponsor bits as well. Love to have more people supporting the show. It would be wonderful. But if you can't do it because you're having financially hard times, you can't support one-time or multiple-time payments, subscribe to Liberal Dan Radio on YouTube and to all my other social media platforms. That's another great way. Share it around. Even if you're conservatives, be like, hey, this guy Liberal Dan, we might not agree, but he's trying to be reasonable and he's fair and he likes to, he welcomes people from the other side to have debates and conversations. And I believe I've given both of the people who are still on hold, and we'll go back to them, I think I've given them much more time than many conservative talk shows would give their callers, their liberal callers, and even many liberal shows would give their conservative callers, because I do want to hear what the other side has to say, even if I don't agree with it, because I want to have a better understanding of what the people I disagree with. And hey, maybe they'll change my mind on something, or maybe after enough conversation I'll change their mind. And that's one of the good things about conversation. And it's happened before with me, and I've had it happen before in political conversations, and I'd love to see it happen again. Now, before we get back to the phone calls, we do have the 2 bits I wanted to play. Did I play last week's or this week's already? I played last week. So let's go ahead and play this week's Hypocrite of the Week.
This week's Hypocrite of the Week is Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says it will be important to see what will come out of the January 6th Select Committee. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell was opposed to a bipartisan commission on the subject. If it was that important, why didn't Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell support it back then? To see who next week's Hypocrite of the Week will be, tune in to Liberal Dan Radio, talk from the left, that's right, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Central on blogtalkradio.com/liberaldan.
And there we go. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. I love saying Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell as much as possible whenever Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is the Hypocrite of the Week, which happens a lot on the show. And another interesting, I did also create the Words of Redneck Wisdoms. Let's go ahead and hammer that out right away, and then we'll get back to our calls. This is again, sometimes, conservatives don't, some conservatives don't do other conservatives any favors when they call in the talk shows and start talking like this.
And now, Words of Redneck Wisdom, brought to you by Liberal Dan Radio.
I just kind of want to tell you guys some things that I see that most people don't see. I've never owned a cell phone. I've never owned a computer, but I know how they work. They were designed to keep you guys' face looking down when nobody's looking up. I am talking about this Green New Deal that was signed in 2008 by Obama, Barack Hussein Obama. You should never, ever give anybody that kind of power. What I'm talking about, wireless is everything nowadays. Your cell phone towers that they call cell phone towers, those are not cell phone towers. Those are wind manifolds that can direct the wind. If you can direct the wind, control the wind direction, you can control the weather. I've been hearing everybody talk about fake news. The weather is the fakest thing we have. And when I'm getting 11 inches inside of 2 months in Arizona, when we're supposed to get less than an inch a year, there's a serious problem. This is serious. This is what changed our country. Ever since the new Green Deal was sent in 08, we have had nothing but destruction. And this storm that happened in Kentucky, unfortunately, I'm telling the truth. Jesus is my king, and I will always tell the truth. I need people to pay attention. Wireless is like you push your bell out in the street, your bell rings. That's what they're doing to control the weather. And you guys need to pay attention to what's going on in the sky.
And this concludes Words of Redneck Wisdom, brought to you by Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left, that's right.
That's what does Donald Trump have to say about that?
You know, it's called science.
Thank you, Donald. Sometimes when I listen to that show, there will be a caller, and I'm like, "That's the guy. That's the words of Redneck Wisdom this week." Cell phone towers are wind manifolds that are controlling the weather, and when you ring your, Ring doorbell from the street, that's how they control the weather wirelessly. Yeah. What was that again, Donald?
You know, it's called science.
Thank you, Donald.
It is what it is.
Yes, it is. It is what it is. Thank you. Oh my God. So gives you a good chuckle. Hope it gave you a good chuckle as well. Let's bring our first caller back on the line. Because you've been waiting patiently, and I would maybe like to kind of swing back eventually to whether or not why is Joe Manchin a Democrat, because that was supposed to be the main topic of the show, but we can still talk about the other things as well. So welcome back. Thank you for holding on. Any additional thoughts that you might have?
Actually, I really just like your the caller after. I thought he was the best guy there is.
I figured you would. I figued you would like him.
Whatever he's running for, I'm voting.
There you go. So, well, let's get you both on, so y'all can talk about your potential campaign. You want to run for office one day?
I'm gonna go VP by him, right next to him.
All right. So we got a future presidential ticket. Look, hey, I'll tell you what. I'd rather both of y'all over Donald Trump. So if I'd rather end up with both of y'all. As president, vice president, as the nominees for the president, vice president for the Republican Party, than Trump and DeSantis. I'll tell you that.
Oh no! Right. Don't mark DeSantis, man. That's the next Reagan. That guy's going to be dominant, man. You Democrats, you guys are going to hate him with more than you'll hate Trump. Believe me when I tell you that.
DeSantis 2028.
Now look, here's one thing I don't get with DeSantis, and here's one thing I don't understand with conservatives and DeSantis, and it's a bit of hypocrisy on DeSantis and on the. Now, to me, conservatives are supposed to be small government, like hands off businesses. Businesses should be able to do what they want to do. But he's not. He's not. He tried to tell businesses that they can't say you have to have a mask to come into my establishment. Shouldn't a business?
Oh no.
No.
Yeah, that's what he's pushing.
No,
well, liberal Dan, come on now. Listen. You can't. When it comes to DeSantis, that's a losing argument for the left, because what he's done in Florida, the left has no chance of winning Florida now for the next couple of years because of him. If you look at the polls there, the support he has, it's a wrap. Florida went from a 50-50 state to a 75% for Republican state now. It's completely gone because of him. And to underestimate this guy, the reason what him and Trump have, which the left refuses to acknowledge, and why the right like these guys, is they're fighters. They're not cowards like most Republicans are, and they're not afraid of the liberal media, which in order to win, in order to push a conservative agenda, you have to have some courage and a willingness to fight the liberal corporate media, which for you guys on the left, you've got most of the media behind you.
But here's the thing. But here's the thing, though.
Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, CBS, ABC News. I can keep going down the list. Every major news outlet, with the exception of Fox News and the Wall Street Journal, is pro-Democrat. That's undeniable. Harvard has done studies on it. Columbia has done studies on it. It's been clearly demonstrated. Anyone with 2 eyes and 2 ears can see that and hear that. So you guys have a massive advantage in when it comes to the
But you've just completely changed the subject, though. I don't underestimate DeSantis. I understand that he's very popular. I understand conservatives love him. I'm just trying to figure out why. When it comes, you like it because he stands up to Biden. You understand? You love the fact that he stands up to Biden.
No, not stands up to Biden. No. We don't need a Republican to stand up to Biden. That's not difficult. Anybody can do that. What we need is a Republican or a conservative that can stand up against the onslaught that the liberal corporate media is going to do to you. Any Republican that gets out of line, that tries to push a conservative agenda, will be demonized. His family will be demonized. He'll be attacked viciously. Now, does that person have the courage to withstand that and to fight back, or are they going to fold up like a lawn chair, like 95% of Republicans always do?
But that's not my point. My point here is, under conservative thought, shouldn't a business be able to say, I only want to have people in my who come into my business, you have to wear a mask, and if you don't wear a mask, you have to leave. Isn't that a conservative? Wouldn't conservatives say a business should have the ability to do that?
No, not in this regard. Okay, let's be clear.
No.
The mask thing is a political statement. It has nothing to do with medical issues or anything. We know that COVID can go through a mask, unless you have a N95.
But wait, I'm gonna have to put you on mute because we'll come back to you. But I'm gonna have to put you on mute because whether or not masking is effective. Now we can have I'm going to still continue to agree that masking is effective in preventing the spread to other people. It's not a 100% guarantee, but it will help you be less likely to spread it to other people if you have it. So if a business wants to say,
am I off now?
You're not off now. I muted the other one. If a business,
but that's the difference between conservatives and libertarians. I believe that the market should dictate. If nobody wants to go to his stores or nobody wants to go to his places, that's their business.
Right. But that's the thing.
Then the market dictates it.
So then if a business also wanted to say,
it's the market.
If a business also wanted to say you need to show a vaccination card to be able to come into our establishment,
that's
again,
fine. I will not go to that business.
Right, and that's fine. But DeSantis specifically is making it so that businesses can't do that when a.
Oh no! So what he's doing is he's exercising everybody's right to free market.
No, he's not. He's not, because he's saying that businesses are not allowed to do that. He's preventing.
No, he's only saying state institutions can't do that.
No.
I'm sorry, but schools are run by the state, dude.
I'm not talking about the schools. I'm talking about like what he did when it came to like cruise ships. He wouldn't allow cruise ships to operate in Florida if they were going to require masking and vaccinations. He was telling cruise ship companies that they couldn't operate in the state.
Right, so go get a cruise ship out of New York. It's fine.
But that's hypocritical, because if you're conservative, you're supporting a free market, you should say the cruise ship should be able to say whether or not they want to allow.
No. Him and his constituents have a belief, and they're following the belief.
So you're for tyranny, you're just for statewide tyranny instead of federal tyranny, right?
Where's the tyranny there?
Because they're telling you how to live your life. They're telling businesses how to run themselves. You're telling.
No, they're telling you can't. They're telling everybody that you can't tell anybody how to live their life.
No, you're telling a business.
That's the opposite.
He's telling a business that they can't set up a policy for themselves that say, this is what we're in the middle of a global pandemic. We want to be able to require that anybody who's going to be anybody. Wait, no. I'll have to mute you as well. This is what DeSantis has done in his state. He has said that if you want to operate a cruise ship out of a port of Florida, that you have to not impose mask mandates or vaccine mandates or whatever. That's telling a business that they can't operate in the way. So conservatives say all the time that we want government to get out of the way of business until those businesses start doing things that those conservatives don't like, at which point conservatives have no problem using the power of the state to come down on them and say, no, you can't do this. That's hypocrisy. That is absolute hypocrisy, regardless of whether or not DeSantis, now DeSantis is free, and the state of government, Florida, is free to say, look, we are not going to require masks in our government buildings. We are not going to require masks in our schools. We are not going to require to have, they can say there's no mask requirement. But what they're going beyond that, they're telling private businesses that those private businesses cannot implement their own safety rules, their own sets of things that they feel is the right. That they are there. It is not free market. You know, conservatives will tell you every day, we believe in the free market. But no, this is not free market. This is not free market capitalism, because you're telling those businesses that they are not allowed to do what they feel that they need to do in order for them to have their employees feel safe, in order to have, you know, their other customers feel safe. If you want to run it, if you were really believed in conservatism and if you really believed in the idea of a free market, then you should not be telling these people, these businesses, that they can't implement whatever policies that they deem necessary. You should be telling them, fine, you want to have a rule that says you have to wear a mask? Fine. You deal with the consequences of whatever customers are going to come in or not going to come in. You want to have a vaccine requirement for customers or for your employees? Fine. You can implement that, and then you'll deal with the repercussions if you lose customers because customers don't want to be vaccinated, then they'd rather go somewhere else where they don't have to be vaccinated. That would be non-hypocritical. But no, DeSantis is a huge hypocrite when it comes to that, because I don't want to hear on this particular issue on how effective vaccines are. I don't want to hear on this issue how effective masking is, because that's irrelevant to whether or not a business should be able to set up safety standards for themselves. And what they feel is they want what they believe is comfortable, what they believe is safe, what they believe is protecting of their employees and their customers and themselves. And DeSantis, by him requiring businesses not do that, is hypocritical, is absolutely hypocritical. And conservatives supporting DeSantis for doing that shows that you're not for open markets, you're not for free markets, you're for pushing your beliefs on others. And you then cannot call out liberals for doing the same thing. I'm going to bring you both back on for your comments.
All right. Well, what I would comment about that is he did not, and you can look this up. He did not say that cruises cannot have people for whatever reason. He said that he will not allow the ports to demand vaccines. The ports, not the ships, not the businesses, the ports.
I'm reading from this right here from the FloridaPhoenix.com. The DeSantis administration is okay with all that as long as cruise lines don't demand vaccination proof.
Well, that's because they run out of the ports. That's what his main thing was.
But that's the cruise line.
Because the ports are run by the state.
But
they can do whatever they want, because you can't buy a ticket unless they decide that they're going to sell you a ticket. So they have freedom to sell whoever they want. He said you cannot allow it at the ports. Was he wrong for that?
Yes, it's hypocritical.
No, he said at the ports. He said it's a state run. It's state run.
The ports are state run, but still the cruise. But he's telling the cruise ship company that they can't require a vaccine to get on board.
That's fine. Fucking ship them out of South Carolina. That's fine. But you will not demand a vaccine.
You can make the same argument
at a port.
You can make the same argument for, like, oh, you're using a state-funded road, so therefore you can't require. So then your local Piggly Wiggly can't allow, or whatever, can't have a masking requirement to enter their stores.
What is a Piggly Wiggly?
Yeah, but Dan, we've already established that the vaccine requirement thing is already it's basically pointless at this point.
But that's irrelevant. But again, that's irrelevant.
Negative test would be okay. That makes sense. But requiring a vaccine is irrelevant now because we know that even if you're fully vaccinated, you can still get COVID and transmit to other people.
But it's irrelevant to the point.
Of requiring people to be vaccinated in the first place to enter a certain establishment.
But that's irrelevant to the point I'm making.
Unvaccinated.
But
I understand. I get your point you're making. I'm just saying the whole concept of requiring a vaccine passport and all that is now basically antiquated based on what we know now.
But my point is that a business is
based on what we knew 6 months ago.
DeSantis is telling private businesses beyond cruise ships, that they're not allowed to implement these things on their customers.
Oh yeah, on that point, I agree with you. I agree with you on that point. I think that's a move by DeSantis.
No. He said state. He said businesses too. If you own a convenience store, you're allowed to do whatever you want. He never said that.
He did.
So that's a lie, Dan.
Wait.
First of all, it's something that I believe is true, so that can't be a lie. If I believe something is true when I say it, it cannot be a lie by definition. If you prove me wrong, I'll admit that I was wrong.
If you believe in a tooth fairy, doesn't make it true, bro.
I know, but I'm just saying it's not a lie.
I think he's asking whether you believe that it's right or wrong. So if he's saying that it's wrong for DeSantis to tell companies that they can't enforce a mask, mandate or a rule in the room. I think he has actually. I think that's actually policy.
No, he said anything controlled by the state will not allow a vaccine mandate.
He has said that, but he says other things as well.
We're talking about the mask.
If you got a hot dog stand or a strip club, you can do whatever you want. You can refuse whoever you want.
Okay, let me make sure. So Dan, did you say?
Done.
Well, so Dan, did you say that DeSantis put a policy in saying companies cannot force you to wear a mask in their business? Or what was your point?
I believe that is true. I believe that DeSantis has said that there are private businesses beyond. I know he said it for cruise ships, that he doesn't want cruise ships.
Not one time. No.
I literally just cited his administration saying that cruise ships can't have vaccine mandates. Now, I believe he has other. But what difference? If it's out of a port or if it's on a state-run road, what's the difference?
Dude, they can sail out of Georgia, no problem.
But that's not the point.
No, because that's Homeland Security issues. You do understand the ports are Homeland Security issues, so he controls Homeland Security.
He can control the port, but that doesn't necessarily. But what does a cruise ship company requiring a vaccine mandate? What does a cruise ship company?
No, he said you can't do that. You cannot require a vaccine mandate. You cannot have that at the port because that's controlled by the state.
What does that have to? What does that have to? What does that have to do with Homeland Security?
Helicopter people out of Orlando, that's fine.
What does that have to do with Homeland Security?
No, you guys are arguing separate things. He's talking about the port. You're talking about the cruise ships, a private business.
Right. I'm talking about the cruise ships. Obviously, use the port just like private businesses use state-funded roads.
You're both right for the different points you're making.
He's the governor of Florida. He runs Florida.
Well,
so what he's saying is you cannot require that because that's part of the government of Florida. That's the Florida governs everything that goes.
Well, the cruise ships can't require a mask or a vaccine to enter the cruise. The cruise ship companies can't. Wait. Hold on. Let me. I'm gonna have to mute again. Because I need to get my point across. The cruise ship companies are not saying that you need. The cruise ship companies cannot say that you need to wear a mask or have a vaccine to enter a port. Clearly, that's not anything that's within any realm of what. They're not saying that. If DeSantis wants people running around the ports without vaccines or without masks, fine. DeSantis can do that all he wants. It's a state-run thing. But DeSantis is also saying that the cruise ships themselves cannot require you to be vaccinated to enter the ship. And that's the problem. That's the hypocrisy there. The hypocrisy is that DeSantis is telling these businesses that they can't implement policies that they want to implement, which is hypocritical when it comes to conservatism. We do have a third caller on the line, so we're going to bring the third caller on. Hello, caller. Where are you calling from? or Skyping from, I should probably guess.
Yeah, I'm everywhere, man. It doesn't matter. What's going on, though?
How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm cool, man. Cool. I see you having the usual, listening to the grievance party, air their usual grievances.
Yes, it happens. This is my friend from Atlanta, isn't
what's
it?
Up, man? Yeah.
Yeah, how's it going, man? It's good to hear from you again.
To ever do it, you know. I try, man. It is what it is. But yeah, so the grievance party is now, after politicizing the idea of a pandemic, they're continuing that. We're getting the results we're getting, and now they want to argue about all the details of that very idea. So, hey, man, it is what it is. We see the outcomes at this point. If we're still listening to conservatives and YouTubers, I don't know what to say. This country's in a bad place.
Yeah.
I like more DeSantis and people like him, and you'll get what you get.
Absolutely, you are going to absolutely get what you get, and if we treated Florida like we did the entire nation, I could only imagine how many deaths we would have in this country. And because people say herd immunity. Well, our first caller today had it twice, so having antibodies, it doesn't last forever. So he said that he wasn't very sick, and that's fine. I mean, I felt when I think that I had it, I think I had it in January 2020. It wasn't confirmed by a test because we didn't have tests back then. But I'm sure we had more than the 13 cases that we knew that we had back then. I felt sick as a dog for like 3 days or 4 days before I went to the doctor, and he was like, well, take this medicine and whatever. He was like, you have a virus, but it's not the flu. And I was like, okay. And then thinking back to it, I was like, oh, I probably had COVID, but I haven't gotten it again. But I also have been vaccinated, and I have been doing things like socially distancing and masking and, being generally responsible in the middle of a pandemic. But unfortunately...
Yeah, I mean, which is helpful, but it's not a guarantee of anything. Like, you can do everything right, and somebody else's mistake could actually be the thing that, get you the virus. So it is what it is. This is how pandemics work.
Yeah, let's let Donald say it.
It is what it is.
Thank you, Donald.
Indeed. But no, man, like the biggest, like I saw your title with Manchin in it.
Yes.
And like the biggest thing with Manchin, like we got to ask ourselves this. If you win an area, but ideologically that area supports the other party as far as their thinking, how they vote, what matters to them, did you actually really win? So Manchin was always going to be a problem. I mean, this is similar to Joe Lieberman back in the day. So this is a typical Dem problem. And say what you want to say about that rat-faced, murdering, raggedy MFer in Kentucky, Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell would have got folks in line. So when you look at the leadership of the Dem Party, who can't get people in line to pass overwhelmingly popular policy, that's a failure of governance.
Well,
no other way to say that.
Mitch didn't get John McCain in line when they tried to overturn the Affordable Care Act, which was, one of my favorite John McCain moments.
Well, yeah, but there's a hanging Chad there if we're talking politics. There's a hanging Chad there.
Yeah.
They didn't have an actual plan that they really wanted to implement at the time either. So remember that part too.
They always said repeal. They always said repeal and replace, but they never had anything to replace it with, except for some bizarre cockamamie thing that would, quote, allow businesses to violate the 10th Amendment, or they say sell insurance across state lines, but in which case they would have had to.
Which companies could already do if they wanted to, but they wouldn't because that would be a race to nowhere. Because then you would be putting populations against each other,
right?
And no insurance company is going to pick the people of Flint over the people of Kalamazoo. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right. But I mean, like they say insurance companies can't sell across state lines, but why is there Blue Cross Blue Shield of Maryland and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Louisiana and Blue Cross Blue Shield of all these other places? Because you have Blue Cross Blue Shield selling in multiple states. So, hello.
Right. Like, no matter what with insurance, you're looking for healthy bodies.
Right.
And the last thing you want to do is start dividing up areas based on the idea of, age, health,
Right. The larger the pool, the better it is.
Indeed. So we got to fix this some way. But either way, man, interesting listening to you have your back and forth with them. One of the callers who hates my guts. I'm sorry for beating you up so much over the years in conversation, sir. He knows who he is. But yeah, man, I just wanted to call in for a second. I'll hang back and listen to y'all.
All right, I appreciate you calling in. Have a good one, man. Good to hear from you.
For sure.
All right, I'm going to put him back on mute. All right, we're going to come back to the other callers again just to go back to, because I was able to say what I wanted to say. Now, we may just go one at a time if it gets too unruly, but all right, so, like, do you understand my point about the whole, yes, a cruise ship company can't force the cruise terminal or the port.
I agree with you on that point 100%.
Okay.
I think as far as him telling a company, for example, private business, that they can't require people to wear a mask, I think that's wrong. I'll agree with you on that point.
Okay, good.
But that's a small. But that's the thing I wanted to actually talk about. Let's focus on sort of the general flip in the country where we're going to for the left. It's amazing how things have shifted for you guys completely. And the confidence and the arrogance to me is kind of at this point I don't know where it's based on, because after what we saw happen in Virginia and in New Jersey, if I was a Democrat, I'd be worried, because all the polls, all the momentum is headed towards an absolute red wave election in 22 that's going to be greater than what we saw in 2010.
Well, one thing I don't understand about Democrats, and being one, is that for some reason they believe that policies I usually word it that rights for some reason they think that rights can't be taken away in off-year elections. But again, policies can be implemented in or determined in off-year elections. So, but for some reason people don't come out all the time. Like, I vote in every election. I don't care what it's for. There could just be a single ballot initiative that's just like an ordinance or a tax levy or whatever that's called. It could be a bond issue or something about a local fire department, or it might be president and everything down. I'm going to come out and vote because it's important to do it. I don't understand the mindset of people who only come out and vote in major elections, because if you support what the top guys support, then they need the support of the people underneath as well. So to allow Virginia to flip to a red governor is just... Why would you not come out and vote? It doesn't make any sense to me. There should be more of a sense.
They had a good turnout.
Yeah.
There was a good turnout. The issue at hand was that there was a lot of people that did vote blue in 20 that changed their vote. I mean, even MSNBC Morning Joe did a whole breakdown of it, how you had a lot of suburban moms in some of I forgot the exact name of the counties. We're talking about the counties near D.C. and Richmond that were heavily in favor of Biden in the 2020 election, that a lot of those voters changed their votes, and a lot of it had to do with some things they found out. So in 2020, I think Democrats and Biden benefited from the anti-Trump vote. And
clearly,
people just voting purely based out of emotion, right? Now what happened in this election, where people were voting on what they saw being done from a policy standpoint, let's take education as an example. Because of the COVID shutdown, a lot of parents got to actually see firsthand what was being taught to their children in schools. And they became more aware of what school boards were trying to push. And despite the mainstream media trying to claim that Virginia was not going to or wasn't implementing aspects of critical race theory, they were doing that. In fact, the governor had already put in a mandate requiring that they implement that within the next year. But because of those things, you pissed off people, and people turned, and then they went the other way. And then on top of that, we're seeing some of the other policies. Biden, remember, ran in 2020 as a moderate. Remember, he claimed he was not going to have a vaccine mandate. He was not going to embrace the radical left agenda. Remember, that was his whole thing in 2020. I'm the moderate. I'm going to be stable. I'm going to be the unifier. That was his whole motive. And then when he got in office, he essentially has gone to the left. All that, I'm a moderate, I'm not going to implement the vaccine mandate, all these different things that go down the list, whether it be inflation, whatever. All the polls have shown Biden and the Democrats are completely underwater, and it's undeniable. NBC just put out a poll right now, I think 2 days ago, in conjunction with Marist and I believe, I'm trying to think who's the third company, but it was three companies did all together at the same time. Biden's approval, 41%. His disapproval amongst independents was around 76%. Amongst Hispanics, it was around 61%, the highest disapproval rate any Democrat has gotten in recent history amongst Hispanic voters. And I can go down the list. everything is pointed towards you guys are going to be destroyed in next November. And even more than that, 40 polls are coming out where Trump is favored over Biden in 2024. And if Biden doesn't run, who are you guys going to run? Kamala Harris?
Kamala.
Approval rating is 28. Kamala, whatever, it doesn't matter. You know what I'm talking about. But the point is, what was our approval rating? 28%. It's even lower than Biden's. So you guys are totally stuck, man. I mean, I don't know what you guys are going to do, but the reality of the matter is Republicans are going to take the House back significantly. That's obvious. I mean, that's a given. The Senate they're going to get, by how much we'll find out. And in 2024, it's clearly going to be the Republican, whether it be Trump or Biden, will be the favorite. It's undeniable.
I mean, at this moment, the polling backs up what you say. Of course, you know, I do think that Democrats should have more of a spine when it comes to that. And the other problem is, of course, one of the problems that I've been dealing with in my video series, or the 4 video series that I have on the GOP coup, and the more detailed look that I have on gerrymandering in this country, which is, you know, looking at how each state gerrymanders, how each state draws its congressional districts, and how many states fail to adequately represent their population as it pertains to, you know, right versus left, Democrat versus Republican in Congress. And even though I've only gotten to the seven congressional district states, I still have to go do the higher ones. We've already seen that the Republicans have a disproportionate advantage, disproportionate say in control of Congress based off of the population in each of the states. So you already have a situation.
Do Democrats gerrymander?
I just said that they both do, yes. And if you should watch the video series.
I just want to make sure you clarified that.
You should watch the video series.
I know a lot of liberals that oftentimes portray that gerrymandering being only a Republican phenomenon. Because take a state like Maryland, where the Democrats have gerrymandered every Republican out of existence there. So you can go whatever state is getting controlled by the left, they'll do their thing. If it's by the right, they'll do their thing.
Well, we'll get to Maryland, but overall, if you look at the entirety of all of the congressional districts in this country, and you compare them to, like, for example, in each state as to how each state voted for president, which is the really only measure that you can look at, because as I've determined while looking at the states, is that some states, the districts are so gerrymandered that some people don't even bother running from the other party. So you end up having, like, you can't look at how many votes you got for Congress, for example, because one party might have a significant less amount of votes for Congress because one entire district didn't even have a candidate for one of the two major parties. So you have to look at how they came out to vote for the presidential elections. Like in Louisiana, which is generally a red state, even though we have a Democratic Party governor. Sort of, he's conservative, but you know, he's pro-life, but he's, you know, generally speaking, Democrat. I mean, conservatives I know will call him a liberal, even though he's signed one of the most conservative pro-life bills in the state, in the nation, if Roe versus Wade ever gets overturned, that is. But if you just look at how Louisiana voted for president, you know, or if you look at the party registration, even there should be 2 congressional districts in Louisiana that are Democrats, that are represented by Democrats to adequately represent Louisiana in Congress, but they've packed many of the black voters into one major district, making it so that it's 5-1 instead of 4-2. So, and there are other states, and
but like you've already acknowledged that does happen on both sides. Like take Michigan, right? What's the congresswoman was part of the squad? Was it Talib or Taib? What was her last name?
It could be Talib. I think Talib's Michigan.
Oh, Talib, right. So take her district, for example. No Republican even runs there.
Right.
There's a no contest district. Right. So it happens on both sides. Like I said, depends who controls the state. So take California.
It happens on both sides, but the thing is that
you think they're not going to try to gerrymander, or you think they're not going to try to gerrymander Republican representation out of the way? Of course they are.
Well, I don't think that
it's all a power grab.
I don't think that
they're power hungry. I agree with you 100%. Both sides are corrupt, and both sides engage in tactics to try to grow their power. You're not going to get me to disagree with you on that.
Right, but at the end of the day,
it comes down to
At the end of the day, the Republicans have, because of the way that they gerrymander versus the way that the Democrats draw the districts, and in some states,
yeah, it's because they control more of the country.
And in some states,
right?
for example, Colorado is generally speaking a blue state. It's more like there's some
recently
purple there, but the districts are drawn by a bipartisan commission. So there are states that have bipartisan commissions that draw lines versus states where it's completely done by a simple majority vote of the legislature. Those are big differences there. Like California, like spoiler alert, if you're going to watch the entirety of the video series once I get there, at the end of the day, California does have a disproportionate number of Democratic seats compared to how many of the states voted for Donald Trump. But the thing with California is they also have a bipartisan commission that draws the district as compared to just being a simple majority vote, whereas many other states only have a simple majority vote, where you have the potential of perhaps a governor who might be able to veto it, but in most cases, if you have a legislature controlled by the Republicans, in many cases you also have a Republican governor as well. So you're going to have states that have no Democratic representation that are completely red, even though there should be one or even two of those seats. Now, does it happen on the
right? So what would your remedy be? Are you saying that the federal government should intervene, or what? I mean, this is obviously a states' rights issue, and if the state has that law in place, that's their prerogative. So
well,
are you saying the federal government should intervene, or what?
Here's my nitpick on that term. There's no such thing as states' rights. States have powers as determined by the 10th Amendment.
Okay, powers.
People have rights. Okay, and that's my nitpick on that.
Okay, let's say
but the federal government does have the power. Wait, hold on. The federal government has the power under the 14th Amendment to make laws that would, in order to protect people, make sure that they have equal protection under the law, make sure that that the states are not disenfranchising them. 14th Amendment clearly grants Congress that power to do so. So SB 1, which I think is the SB 1.
Right, but remember, elections are determined on a state level.
Right, elections are determined on a state level, but the federal government does have the authority to dictate certain things about how they're run to make sure that states are following the rules.
Right, but that has to be hashed out in court. I mean, you can say that, but ultimately, if it doesn't hold up in court, I don't think necessarily, because just because things so happen to play out in, say, a Republican favor doesn't make it wrong. A lot of times, that seems to be the left's argument in a lot of positions where, if your side does it, it's fair play. If the Republicans do it,
you'll never hear. You're never going to find me in that video series on that talking about how if it's okay for one and not the other. I'll never make that argument. It's not okay to gerrymander either way.
If you're consistent, then I respect that. Then if that's the case, then I'm totally with you. Okay, no problem with that.
So I would encourage you to watch those videos.
That doesn't excuse what happened in Virginia and New Jersey and in the direction of the country politically right now. Why do you think that the polls and everything is turning so much against the Democrats and Biden? What do you think is the cause of that?
I think that I think a lot of people are upset that they voted for Biden to do certain things and they haven't gotten done. Unfortunately, part of the reasons why they haven't gotten done is because of the fact that you have what I consider to be people of bad faith in the Republican Party who will just refuse to work with the Democrats on anything, on anything of substance.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Did the Democrats work with Trump on anything when he was president? Of course not. Stop it.
Democrats.
That's what parties do.
The Democrats have.
That's not my question. My question is why are the polls in the country? We're not talking about Republicans. Why is the country turning against Democrats? That's the issue on the
because
table.
They're blaming the Democrats because they're blaming the Democrats for not doing what they wanted to do, even though it's the Republicans and Joe Manchin who are blocking much of it. And yes, the Democrats did help Donald Trump during the pandemic pass the legislation that got the PPP funding, that got the EIDL loans, that got expanded unemployment
that's
insurance.
Different. That was something that they have to do anyway. I'm talking about actual.
No, they didn't have to do it.
For example,
they didn't have to do it.
When we talk about Trump's agenda, they oppose them. Build Back Better is Biden's agenda. Republicans are going to oppose him because that's the Democrat agenda item. So when it comes to political partisan issues, the Democrats don't work with Republicans. Republicans don't work with Democrats. That's a fact. Doesn't matter who's on who. It would happen either way, no matter what.
I could point it many times through history that Democrats have.
What I'm going to ask you is this.
Okay.
What I'm going to ask you is this. Instead of making this issue of trying to point at the Republicans, I'm being real here. Did Biden or the Democrats do anything from their actions or decisions they made that might have swung the pendulum to the right? Is there anything they've done?
I mean, I'm sure there are people who have COVID fatigue who don't like the continued, requirements that are being placed by the Biden administration on things that have to be done in order to fight the pandemic, or things that are, I'm sure you might argue with, have to be done, but things that the Biden administration feel that...
Perfect. Let's just go right there. Hold on, before we move on. Did Biden promise he would not implement a vaccine mandate when he was running for office?
Biden at one point said he didn't want to have. I think he said that he didn't want to have to put a vaccine mandate into place.
Yeah, exactly. He made that was a promise, because remember, the Trump and the Republicans were saying that that's what he was going to do, and he was trying to make it clear that's not what he was going to do. That's why he said that. Remember, I followed closely all the points that were made. And then what did he try to do with OSHA? Make it to where your employer could fire you for not being vaccinated. Otherwise, they'd have to pay that fine, which is essentially a roundabout way of putting a mandate. You don't think that pissed off a lot of people?
I'm sure it did, but,
It did, clearly. Okay, now let's go to number 2, inflation. Does inflation or the rising gas prices, you think, play any role in that? In some of the discontent with Democrats and Biden?
I am sure that gas prices help with discontent, but how much does Biden have when it comes to... Presidents don't determine gas prices, so I would argue till I'm blue in the face.
Come on now, brother. Let's be clear. We talk about consistency, which I respect that you try to maintain consistency. When Trump was president, let's be honest, anything negative that happened, he was blamed for it. Period. He was literally blamed for the people that died from COVID. Let's just get to it. Anything negative that took place in our country, he was directly put at fault for it.
I have said on I have said wait. I have said on this show
that you can't be blamed for that.
Wait, I have said on this show.
I'm not accusing you of that.
No. What I'm saying is that I'm going to be consistent. I have said on this show that I don't blame Donald Trump for all of the COVID deaths, but I think that there are a significant set of deaths that are his. That if he would have done things differently, that were preventable. I do think that there.
I respect you for that.
I also think that
some on the left.
I also think that there are deaths that took place because of Cuomo. I think Cuomo had some hands that he's responsible for some deaths. I think Newsom.
No, but that's not what I'm asking.
Right. No, what I'm saying is that there are deaths that are involved.
Media.
Okay, but I'm
not talking about you personally.
Okay,
I'm talking about the liberal corporate media that pushes most of the leftist narrative, the Democrat narrative. When Trump was in office, or especially during the election, were they not trying to pin most of the COVID deaths on him? Did you not sense that?
They were trying to put a lot of the COVID deaths on him. I think they're...
Okay, and now did Biden do that as well? Remember when Biden claimed that all the people that died were because of Trump? He said that repeatedly, including on the CNN town hall.
Did he say all, or did he say that there was preventable deaths?
Yeah, he did all. He said all. He said none of those people would have died if it were not for Trump. Literal quote, exact quote from him. That's what he said on the CNN town hall with Anderson Cooper. And Anderson Cooper didn't push back at all. He just moved on like there's nothing wrong with that statement. So let's be clear. Now that the shoe's in the other foot, when negative things happen, now we've got to accept the fact that it's fair to blame the president or hold them accountable for the party that's in control. I just think it's interesting how there's a spin being put. I don't know if you follow MSNBC at all, but they have one of their hosts, Stephanie Rule. I don't know if you're familiar with who she is.
Wait, hold on. I was repeat that again because I was looking up something that would.
Okay, I was saying, do you watch MSNBC or read their website at all?
I occasionally watch MSNBC.
Okay, and do you know who Stephanie Rule is? One of their anchors?
Yes.
Okay, now what she said several times, this is what I find fascinating. When the inflation started kicking up really bad, like a month or two ago, and people were really starting to feel the impacts of it. MSNBC, and Stephanie Rule in particular, but MSNBC in general, started to put out articles saying that inflation is not really that bad, and that it only "quote unquote" hurts the rich and not the poor. They literally started saying that. Now, I understand political spin to benefit your side politically, but you'd have to acknowledge that's insane, right?
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. Okay, so now we've got that clear. whenever what people on the left point out the ridiculousness of Fox, which I agree they're ridiculous a lot of times, let's also acknowledge that there's the equal counterpart of Fox exists called MSNBC that pushes a left narrative and makes equally ridiculous claims and has ridiculous hosts like Rachel Maddow, just as Fox has got Sean Hannity. The left and right both have the same problems. And in this issue of hypocrisy, to me, when you talk about politically, I don't think you can't really use that argument because both sides are guilty of committing the same thing. So let's take the 2016 and 2020 election. After 2020, Democrats and the liberal media were accusing Republicans of being a threat to democracy for questioning the election results, saying that there was fraud, what we saw on January 6th, all of that. And they ignored the fact that after 2016, and let's remember 2016, what happened? All the left, the media, questioned the results of the election, said Trump was illegitimate, said there was Russian interference, that the election was not real, that the Russians changed votes. We had a $48 million investigation of Russian collusion, all of that. And these same people forget that and then turn around and blame the other side for doing the exact same thing they did. So both sides, if you're going to make this hypocritical argument, both sides are guilty. And I can go down the list. Any issue you raise about Republicans, whether it be politicians, voters, their news outlets, I can do the exact same thing to the left. So both sides are guilty of it.
Okay, but look,
we'll talk. Okay,
but when I bring up my problems that I have with conservatives, I also bring up problems that I have with liberals too. So you know, yeah, you're gonna say you're not talking about me, you're talking about the rest of the media, but we're talking right now. We're on Liberal Dan Radio. We're not on the rest of the media. So I called for every single senator to resign when the whole crap with the filibuster first came up because, you know, the Republicans were like, we're going to use the nuclear option. The Democrats are like, no, you can't do that. That's not fair. And then the Democrats were like, well, we're going to use the nuclear option. And then the Republicans were like, no, you can't do that. That's not fair. So each of them were hypocrites when it came to it. So I was like, none of them are useful when it comes to that. They all prove themselves to be hypocritical when it comes to that issue. So and I'll call every one of them out for doing so.
That.
And so
would you say that MSNBC is just as ridiculous as Fox News as far as their bias and just ridiculous reporting that both sides do?
I don't think so. I think that
oh my goodness.
Fox News has been. I think Fox News is even less ridiculous than like, you know, your OAN or Newsmax. But I've seen some.
Oh yeah, but they don't count. Those guys are like too extreme. I'm talking about in the mainstream realm.
There's clear bias on the part of MSNBC.
Do you think Rachel Maddow and Joy Reid serious? I mean, come on, man.
I think Rachel Maddow has some very intellectual points that she makes, and you compare it to some of the other like Tucker Carlson. I think Rachel Maddow is much more trustworthy than Tucker Carlson. That's for darn sure.
Oh my God! Oh, dude.
I've criticized Rachel Maddow on the show too.
I respect you. I've debated you a lot of times. I think we agree on a lot of certain points. But come on, man. Rachel Maddow, really?
What do you think? What do you think Rachel Maddow has done or said that?
Person I thought I'd be a fan of Rachel Maddow, to be honest. I never thought I'd hear you say.
I mean, I think it's awesome that she's on Batwoman too, but you know that's a whole different issue. But give me an example of something that Rachel Maddow has specifically done that makes her not somebody who I should consider to be like legitimate.
There's a huge list. Let's start the first one: Russian collusion. She was probably the number one propagator of that whole narrative. Was Russian collusion? I mean, that was her whole network from 2016 to 2018. That's all she talked about. And when that completely fell apart, she had no acknowledgement of the fact that she put out so many false statements. And how she tried to back that the Trump dossier that as if it was legitimate, when we all knew even back then that it was false, and even now it's been proven so. And then let's talk about the fact when it came to Trump's tax returns, how that she got illegally. She tried to claim that it showed that Trump didn't pay his taxes, but it in fact showed that he paid $35 million in 2005, which she conveniently didn't want to acknowledge, right? She tried to pretend like, oh, his tax return showed they didn't pay any taxes when in fact the opposite was true. I can keep going on and on, but at the end of the day, when it comes to Maddow, Joy Reid, whatever, Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, they're the exact same. They're just far left or far right partisans that only report what their side finds necessary and ignore what's inconvenient to their narrative. Would you not agree with that?
I mean, I mean, y'all gonna laugh again, but there are people. I've listened to Fox News a lot. I used to watch Fox News a lot because I thought it was important for myself to watch the other side more than it was to watch my own side. And then it got to a point where I just got sick of it. Now I'll say the same thing about CNN. I got sick of CNN for a lot of the crap that I heard on CNN. If you were to tell CNN, I hardly ever watch CNN at all because I have problems with CNN and how CNN handles things. I don't have as much of an issue with MSNBC as I would with Fox News. And are there people that are biased? Sure, absolutely. There's plenty of bias on MSNBC, and you have to watch those things, those shows. If you agree, if you generally agree politically with the side that is airing their opinion shows, you have to, to be able to strip out the opinion from the facts and be able to discern the facts that are being reported. And then you have to also be able to,
is there anybody conservative on MSNBC that you can even name? I mean, I can at least name contributors that come on to Fox News that are clearly liberal. They don't even allow legitimate conservatives on MSNBC, period. They never let you on the air, even debate a topic.
I think they had somebody on today.
Well, I mean,
I don't remember the guy's name, but I know they had somebody on today that was discussing. I think it was discussing the 2022 and 2024 elections and the issues with Manchin and stuff like that. I don't remember his name, but he was a former Republican strategist.
Was he a Republican or was he?
He was a Republican. He was a Republican.
Like for example, they have Michael Steele. They have Michael Steele on the Morning Joe and on different shows on MSNBC all the time. But Michael Steele, for lack of a better term, is an absolute rhino, right? I mean, he's anti-Trump. He essentially agrees with almost every leftist narrative push on MSNBC. So what they have is emasculated Republicans, yes.
Well, you have a lot of people that are former Republicans, but I mean, do you have to support Trump to be a Republican? Is that
a legit conservative that advocates for conservative issues and is pushbacks against the left? But they don't do that anymore on MSNBC. At least on Fox, they'll bring on a liberal who will actually argue their position and push back against the conservative side regularly, all the time. They have several contributors to that. MSNBC doesn't even let those people come on television. When's the last time Joy Reid or Rachel Maddow had a legitimate conservative even debate them on anything on air on their show?
I can't speak to that. I mean, I watch more of the news during the day than I do the opinion pieces recently.
Okay, well, that's fair. But I mean, like, take Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson. You may disagree with both of them, but you got to acknowledge the fact they regularly bring on liberals and leftists on to debate them on any number of issues. You may not think the debates are framed fairly, but at least they bring them on. I mean, you give them that. That's better than MSNBC, which essentially, has made it illegal to be a conservative on their network now.
Well, my experience watching my experience when I did watch Fox.
You have to publicly admit not to be a Republican anymore to stay on.
My experience watching Fox News had been when they allow a liberal to come on the show, it's one of the ones that'll help them prove their point, i.e., when I used to try and call into like some of the nationally syndicated talk radio shows that are conservative, they would never let me on because I would tell them what point I want to make, and then they just wouldn't let me on. But they'd let the idiots call in because you can more easily deal with an idiot than you can deal with somebody who's trying to make a point. That's trying to make a point that is at least intelligently thought up, if not, even if you don't agree with it. You know what I mean? So,
well, take what about Juan Williams as an example? Juan Williams is a Fox News contributor. He's usually on all host of shows, anything from O'Reilly, Hannity, The Five, whatever show that's on there. And he's a consistent Democrat who advocates for his side. You cannot show me a Juan Williams counterpart on MSNBC that is a regular contributor.
But that's because you call all of them rhinos, though. You call them, I was from Maryland. Michael Steele was a Maryland Republican, but he's a Republican still. He just doesn't support Trump, and that causes a lot of people to go.
No. It's not the issue about Trump. Can you name me one conservative issue that Michael Steele advocates for on MSNBC? One agenda item that he advocates for. There is none.
But he's usually here's the problem. Here's the problem. He's usually on Morning Joe, and Joe and Mika are a bunch of just dullards. So I can't stand Joe and Mika. I can't bring myself to watch them.
No, I agree too. But I'm talking about Michael Steele as far as he doesn't actually advocate for conservative policies at all. He essentially agrees with whatever liberal take they have on there. He agrees with it. He never pushes back. Whereas when you see Juan Williams on Fox, he always pushes back. I mean, I respect the fact that he always stands up for Democrat issues and policies, and he'll debate anybody on Fox with no problem, and you never see any issues. But there's no counterparts like that on MSNBC, and I think that's part of the reason why we're having the problems we're having in our country is because of partisan echo chambers that exist. Because at the end of the day, you and I have opposite views on a lot of issues, but I can look at you and say your motives are sincere and you genuinely want to solve problems, and you just have a different set of solutions than I do.
Okay.
But the current setup right now is turned into, if you're on the opposite side of me politically, your motives are evil, your intentions are nefarious, you have some type of ill means that you're trying to do and all that. It's the demonization of the other side that I think is, and it's primarily done by the left because you guys control everything. You control big tech, you have the majority of the media, you have the majority of education, you control most of pop culture. Every major sphere of influence is dominated by the left.
Well, it's funny. It's funny that you say that we all control big tech, though, because I hardly ever see my conservative friends getting Facebook jail sentences, for example. I was kicked off of, I was not kicked off, but I was put in Facebook jail for 3 times for saying very minor things.
We're all kicked off for life.
What?
Yeah, it happens to conservatives all the time, but Dan, just look up the articles. There's some articles on conservative censorship.
I see conservatives. I report posts that were like, I got kicked off for calling someone a sheep, or not calling someone a sheep, calling somebody a plague rat, or I got.
We get kicked off for life.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, Dan, you are aware of the fact that there's a lot of conservatives are censored, which is why they started things like Rumble and Getter and all the other different social media platforms. Right? I mean, you do know that.
Parler, we tried that. We tried the Parler thing.
Your spot. Like I'm
saying like that. You do, I mean, don't take my word for it. There's a lot of articles from liberal outlets that acknowledge that there's a lot of conservative censorship online. Yeah, I mean, you do acknowledge that, right?
Sure, but there's been a lot of. I just think that there are liberals that also have to deal with this ridiculous censorship that comes from Facebook, and I've.
No. Okay, I'll give you that, but I'll ask you in all honesty, sir, which side gets more censorship done to them, the right or the left?
I mean, there are probably more conservatives kicked off of Twitter than liberals, sure.
Thank you.
But,
exactly. So I mean, and the reason for that is we've already seen investigative, studies into this where it comes to the fact that the fact checkers or the people that are doing the censorship are run by mostly hardline leftists. I mean,
well,
Facebook
because
in court, I don't know if you saw this.
The truth has a liberal bias.
They admitted that their fact checkers are only used there based on opinion and not actual facts. They admitted that in court. So these quote-unquote fact checkers were being motivated by their political opinion and biases, and they used that to silence their political opponents, specifically in this last election, and they admitted that in court. So most of the censorship is done strictly for the left's benefit. And so my point still stands.
Well, I mean, is it for the like? Do you consider? Do you think Twitter is wrong for kicking Trump off of Twitter?
Oh yeah.
Well, Twitter's wrong for that because of what they claim to be. They claim to have the third-party publisher status, similar to what the telecommunication, like the phone lines have.
Okay.
When in reality they're not, because when they engage in censorship, they're no longer a third-party publisher anymore. So this is where the debate between Section 234 reform comes in, where we had to decide what they really are. Now, if they're going to argue we're a third-party public, we're a private company and we can control and moderate, now they can be regulated in certain aspects and they can be sued for certain things. But as long as they try to have immunity through this whole, we're the third party, then they can't do that. They have to choose what they are. That's where the issue comes in. So that's a separate debate all in itself together. But at the end of the day, they got rid of Trump when it was no longer convenient for them. Because they could have got rid of him when he was president, but he was making them a ton of money because he was bringing attention to Twitter.
Well, I think they kicked him off right before he stopped being he was still president when they kicked him off, or when they stopped him from posting.
Well, I mean, they were being pushed to do it before, But it would have hurt them. I mean, it would hurt them financially to do so. I mean, they took a huge hit in the market when they did. But at the end of the day, they have to make a decision as to what they are before they can go forward with this nonsense, which will be hashed out in court. And once the Republicans get back in control, we're going to have a real debate over Section 230, and we'll get to the bottom of it. But the thing I'm trying to ask you, which I'm trying to get you to be clear and on the record for, does the left, and by left I mean pro-Democrat coverage, do you guys have the majority of the mainstream media, yes or no?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have the majority of what you could deem pop culture, whether it be Hollywood, television, music? Do you have the majority of the influencers in that sphere on your side politically? Yes or no?
Sure.
Do you have the majority of the professors in universities and colleges advocating for a liberal/Democrat side? Yes or no?
Let's clarify that. Are you asking if more professors are liberal than conservative, or are more professors? Would you say that the majority of the professors, are most of the professors ideologically liberal or conservative? Would you consider the majority liberal? I would probably say that most people in academia are majority liberal. I don't know if they were using their positions to promote their liberalism, but you know.
Oh, they definitely are. There's not.
Some do. Look, I had one of my English teachers when I was a freshman at Tulane was a complete man hater, like absolutely just bizarre, out of the box, whatever. But I'm sure that there are plenty of other people who are liberals who don't.
I've been enjoying the show so much, but I literally have to go because I have family coming over right now from out of state.
But we have 11 minutes left on the show, so
I have to say goodbye. I love you guys. I just want to say one last thing before I go.
Okay.
Civil War ain't over. It's only halftime.
Oh Jesus.
I'm only kidding. Take care, guys. God bless you guys. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you as well.
All right, God bless, man.
Have a good one. All right, so where we're at, I don't necessarily believe, like, I think that there are conservatives who have a problem with some things that are taught in academia, because they view that those things that are being taught in academia are contrary to conservative points of view, but I don't necessarily think that that's necessarily an example of the professors using their liberalism to promote a liberal agenda. I just think sometimes conservative agendas go against things like, there are certain things that conservatives support that are that just can be anti-science, especially the socially conservative religious folks who don't want certain things, who view like the teaching of evolution as something that's anti-conservative, for example. So I think that there are examples where there may very well be teachers. I mean, most of your, women's studies classes are probably not going to be viewed in a positive light by many conservatives that are out there, because it's contrary to what many of those conservatives believe or are trying to conserve. But that, but I'm sure that, but there is a reason why many four-year universities have liberal arts requirements, because they want you to have a well-rounded view and they want to listen to other sides, and sometimes that includes things like liberal art. I don't know why you're on hold. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I don't know, for some reason you got put on hold and I didn't, unless you had to call back in.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think my call dropped. I had to call back in.
Okay, so I was very confused looking at the board. But yeah, like I don't believe that. But if generally speaking, I'm sure most of academia is liberal, but I don't necessarily know what
not
percent.
Just liberal though, Dan. Not just liberal. They are many of them are radical, hardcore Marxists. And I know this because I have a younger sister who just went to college out in California, and I can attest to the fact that's a fact. But there's a lot of studies on this. And the reason I brought this all up, Dan, is just think about this for a moment. You guys have such an advantage for Democrats. It's truly mind-blowing that you guys don't dominate elections. It really is. It just makes you wonder, like, some of your policies, in all due respect, they're just not that good, man. Because if your policies were as popular as you guys claim to be and were as solid as they were and so forth, they're all great, and you have such a domination of all the spheres of influence. I mean, when you control news, media, you control pop culture, you control education, you guys should be white. There shouldn't even be a Republican anywhere. We should be in the brink of extinction at this point. But for some reason, you guys keep getting your butts kicked.
Well,
I just wonder at some point you got to ask yourself, is there anything wrong with that we're doing that's maybe alienating the people that we're supposed to support, like the working class, like the fact that we have contempt for uneducated people, or we view religious people in such a contemptuous way, or we look down on them like there's this unwashed mass of people that are backwards because they have these traditional values that we view with such contempt. And I just wonder at some point, I feel like if you guys ever woke up and realized, oh, maybe we should actually embrace this working class that we claim to represent, and not alienate these people with the fact that we're against their religion and their values and their tradition. And maybe instead of pushing identity politics that divides people, maybe we should push an economic message that can unite people regardless of their race and color. Then we could form a voting bloc that'd be unstoppable. And then with our media and education support and all the pop culture we have, we would dominate. But for whatever reason, instead of doing that, you guys do the opposite. You hate and make fun of uneducated people. You mock religious people, even though the majority of the working class happens to be religious. You basically push this identity politics nonsense, which divides people and pits people against one another. It's like you guys do everything that you shouldn't do if you were to actually try to win. Like if I was running the Democrat Party, I would have a completely different strategy. But for whatever reason you don't. I just wonder why is that?
Well, part of the thing, like I think part of the reason, like for example, I'm not going to mock somebody for being religious. I know, and I don't see a lot of people mocking people.
Come on, Dan, you've done that several times. You've clearly made fun of Christians, and come on, you know liberals do this all the time.
When did I mock Christians? Like, I will.
In the little clip you played about the guy talking about the towers. Remember how he acknowledged, Jesus is king, and then you talked about earlier when we.
But that's the one thing I didn't criticize him for.
You said religious people are going to be offended because of evolution being taught, and therefore they're going to feel like
Well, no, the religious there. I said there are some religious conservatives that might be offended at that. Religious conservatives. That's not necessarily all religious people.
Well,
I was raised Jewish. I was raised Jewish. I was raised Jewish, but I also was not raised to believe that evolution was contrary to the beliefs of a creator either. That you could have a creator that created things to evolve. But no, there are people who are trying to legislate their religious beliefs, and those are the people that we're being critical of. Those are the people who get my focus. And I did play my words of redneck wisdom.
You know why there's nothing wrong with that? Because the LGBT movement showed everybody on the right that critique that the left used to make back in the 80s and 90s. Remember when you guys used to critique the Christian right and for Christians getting involved in politics? And what was the number one argument you guys made, which I agreed with, which was it's not right to use politics to impose your views or beliefs on people who do not agree with you. Would you agree that's correct?
Yeah. In the fact that you shouldn't be able to use your religious beliefs to force people to not do things, like stopping gay marriage.
No, that's not my point. I'm saying the argument was that Christians should not use politics to impose their views and their beliefs on people who don't agree with them. Like, for example, when we got rid of school prayer, the argument for getting rid of school prayer was there are going to be students who are not religious or maybe believe in a different religion, so we shouldn't force them to do something that goes against their beliefs, right? That was the argument. Correct?
Okay. All right. So what's then your point?
And that's a valid argument. And the same thing was said about Christians in the 80s and 90s when they got involved in politics. Fast forward to today with the LGBT movement and how they've used politics to impose their views on people who don't agree with them, and we've seen being done in education and across the board. So what Christians have
But how is somebody wait, we only have about 4 minutes left.
It's exposed.
We only have 4 minutes left.
But it's a double standard.
But how are people who support equality people who are supporting equality for LGBTQA folks imposing are they forcing people to have gender reassignment surgery? Are they forcing people to get married to somebody of the same sex? Like, are they stopping people?
Oh, no. Let's be clear. Let's be clear here. They're saying, for example, in education right now, all across America, many schools are now teaching homosexuality and transgender to children, including books to elementary kids that graphically illustrate how to have anal sex. I know this because I'm a parent with young children. I'm very aware of this issue, something that I've been following very closely.
I mean, I'm a parent of young kids too. I've never seen that as a book in my kid's school.
I also happen to be an immigrant from Ethiopia, and I'm aware of the fact globally, this happened under the Obama administration, where America was trying to push African nations and nations in Asia and in the Middle East to teach homosexuality and to decriminalize homosexuality in their schools. So this agenda was being pushed globally, okay? Now, the issue I'm pointing out is the statement that was made by the left was, don't impose your beliefs on people who do not agree with you, which was the rallying cry in the 80s and 90s against the Christian right. You fast forward to today, oh, it's okay, though, if you're LGBT to push your views and beliefs on people who don't agree with you, because the left deemed your political beliefs, your views, your values as acceptable, and the Christians are unacceptable. So now what we found out is it's a different set of rules for you guys, and it's a different set of rules for us. Just like we saw in the 2020 and the 2016 election. It's okay for your side to question an election or to question the results or call a president illegitimate, but when we do it, it's treason, it's a crime against the country. Now we're a threat to democracy.
Okay.
The point I'm trying to make
I have to cut you off there because we have about a minute left to go. I have a minute left to go before I have to play the show end. I do want to invite you to come on next Wednesday. I would love to continue this conversation. I do think there's a huge difference in, the people who were disagreeing with the outcome of the election versus the people who literally invaded the Capitol. And we can have that discussion next week if you want. But again, we have 90 seconds left in the show, and I want to get the last thing. I want to remind everybody to check out, the stopthecoup.liberaldan.com if you want to support that effort. Check out my videos. I have my videos on gerrymandering here up on YouTube, youtube.com/liberaldanradio. I also have the GOP coup series, which has 4 videos right now that talk about some of the things leading up to what happened and how since 2010 the Republicans have been manipulating the system in such a way so that they have a advantage that's much higher or much greater than what the Democrats have, despite the advantages that the Democrats might have in media and academia and so forth. But this is the end of this week's episode of Liberal Dan Radio, Talk from the Left, that's right. If you follow me here on YouTube, Blog Talk Radio, Liberal Dan Radio on Twitter, facebook.com/LiberalDan. There's the Anchor podcast as well, which I might do another one of those shortly as well. Again, till next week, this is Dan Zimmerman with Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left, that's right.
Seconds.